The Creative Coliseum would like to begin by acknowledging that we are on treaty land, referred to as Treaty 4 territory, and that all people here are beneficiaries of this treaty. Treaty 4 encompasses the lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect and honor the treaties that were made on all territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we are committed to moving forward in partnership with Indigenous nations in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration.
Hi, and welcome to the Creative Coliseum. I'm your host, David Roman.
I'm your other host, Alicia.
And today we're going to be talking about feature-length filmmaking.
It just occurred to me that I refer to myself as Cher does with one name, and you did two names. So I'm going to correct that. I'm Alicia Van Betju.
Van Betju, I love that.
Carrying on now.
As Cher does. It's like there's that episode of Seinfeld where the guy refers to himself in third person all the time. It's like, Jimmy doesn't like this, Jimmy. So you should start doing that too. Add just Alicia, like anytime you have an opinion.
This is going to become a thing on our episodes where Seinfeld gets a shout out now. Instead of just being Rob Hillstead.
It has become a theme.
Seinfeld is coming up a lot.
Let's not do that. No. Anyways, before we jump into our episode, we have a really exciting guest, but we're going to take a little quick ad break.
Hey there, this is Alicia from Piano TV. I'm a piano teacher, and I've got a bunch of videos up on YouTube if you want to check those out. I also host free monthly webinars on a variety of piano-related topics and make courses about learning piano, whether you're a complete beginner or if you're an intermediate level student. If you are interested in staying up to date with the things I've got going on, you can visit pianotv.net and join my mailing list, where you will also receive a free ebook on how to practice the piano. The courses that I offer open for registration in August, and they run from September to April, where you'll join a group of like-minded individuals and receive personal feedback from myself. Whether you're 29 or 92, it's never too late to learn.
Okay, welcome back. We are hanging out here with Aaron Sinclair. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for coming by. And for those of you who don't know Aaron, so local-based, and by local we mean Saskatchewan-based filmmaker here and well, among other things, we're going to get into all of that. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Saskatchewan. Been a filmmaker for about 13 years now, and I've always been here making films. I've done everything from shooting weddings to commercials to music videos and a ton of short films and a feature film, which is why we're here, I suppose.
One of the reasons. Yes, yeah. Yes.
So one thing that I'm wondering about the trajectory of a lot of filmmakers is there seems to be this mandatory passing through the gauntlet of wedding recording. Is it just a coming of age kind of thing that all filmmakers do?
You know what? More and more, I think there's filmmakers that kind of skip past that.
Oh, nice.
But it is a great way to like use your camera every weekend and make some money. Mm-hmm. But you are shooting the same thing over and over again, and you have no weekends. So.
Yeah, it's funny. This topic has come up before because I've also passed through the wedding shoot gauntlet, and man, it was like no offense to people getting married. You know, I've been married, but man, like, it was like one of the probably the thing I don't miss the most.
Aren't you currently married?
Yeah.
I've been married. Made it sound
I don't mean the marriage part, but the
wedding
You've been through the wedding, yes.
The wedding shoot is something that oh my gosh, like some of them were just, PTSD inducing. But anyways.
So what has your creative journey through the arts looked like?
Well, I kind of started with music. Like when I was young, there was no real, or at least for me, you know, my family never had a camcorder. I didn't think that filmmaking was like an option. Like it was just something that was like too big. That was what you do in Hollywood, right? But my dad had a guitar, and eventually one of my friends was like, "Oh, we should start a band." And I started playing guitar. So started with music, and then I went to school for audio engineering, and, you know, I wanted to learn how to produce bands, and I was in a band. So I thought, well, two birds with one stone. But while I was there, I learned about, you know, like audio for pictures and sound design. And I started seeing somebody who was going to film school, got into film that way, and started to think, well, I've got some stories I could tell. I've got some ideas out there. And there were some movies that kind of jumped out at me as like impactful. Like, oh, I really started to pay attention to the filmmaking process.
Like what movies?
Children of Men was a big one.
Great movie.
That was one where I all of a sudden I was like, whoa, like the camera movements are like changing how I perceive this film. And that was maybe the first time I ever really like thought that. But I had a few friends that were like, talking about movies more seriously as I was growing up, and we started to get into like, there was one weekend where my best friend and we would always go to BG Video World in Assiniboia and pick out like movies to rent for the weekend. And we rented Mulholland Drive, Donnie Darko, and 12 Monkeys.
I know exactly the era, just based on that selection. It's like 2004 or 5 era.
Yeah, a little earlier,
okay.
earlier, but yeah, roughly around that time. And so that I feel like that weekend changed my life in a way where it was like, whoa, like movies can be something completely different. And and then got into filmmaking and making shorts, and I've been doing it ever since.
Where did you go to school? Because I haven't heard your story before. This is all
right.
brand new to me.
I went to OIART in Ontario.
Right.
So the Ontario Institute of Audio Recording Technology.
One of the big ones.
Yeah. It's a like very audio intensive. They only have one program. It's audio, and there's like one intake every year. So it's like it's you for 11 months, and you just like all you do is kind of eat, sleep audio for a while. And it was fun. I lived in a house with like 4 other students, and we would come home and apply what we learned today from Pro Tools class to like whatever DAW we were using, and tried different recording techniques, traded guitars for the day. Like we just had fun with it.
That sounds really nice. Actually, your trajectory is interesting too, because it seems to be that a lot of artists go through this as well, where you're starting on a certain path, but you can't necessarily predict where you're going to go, right? So you're talking about how you started with music and that inspiring your decision to go to school. And had you not done that, you might not have had your interest in film come about. And it's interesting to me how if we don't take those actions to do something in the first place, creative, we're not going to get those future opportunities that we can't predict.
Yeah, and I think like sometimes I would get in my head about it, like, oh, I want to be a musician, I want to be a producer, but it's not working out. But there's these film opportunities, and like, what's my identity? Am I a filmmaker or am I a musician? And eventually got to a point where it's like, well, I'm just me, and I'm just making whatever is in front of me. And now I see it much more connected and fluid.
Yeah, I have a very similar story to you that way, because I didn't go even to school for audio, but the same thing where it's you start in this area and then you kind of start moving into a different area, and I always struggled with that idea of like, oh yeah, same thing. I record rock bands.
What do you call yourself?
Yeah, what am I? You know, and then I started doing more film, and then I just realized that just made more sense for me in the long run too. Yeah,
this does seem to be part of the artist journey, to shed the labels or shed the need for labels as a way to kind of classify who you are.
And it's kind of come back around to the point where like this past year I've composed 2 short films that I have nothing else to do with. I'm just like the composer and some audio stuff. And so it's like I'm starting to do what I initially set out to do more and more again. So
it's not like, you finished with music, you're done with it. You didn't have like a hard break with it at any point.
No, I've, guitars are somewhat, I've got guitars on my walls, and they're just somewhat precious to me. And it's always something that I think like that's actually integrated with my process. When I'm writing, the music is really important. And a lot of times I sort of hear what the scene will sound like before I even write it or see it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, because I come from an audio perspective, that's definitely how I imagine.
You start from the audio, even as a filmmaker.
Yeah, even when I do filmmaking.
That's really interesting to me. I was just sort of imagining, I was trying to, I haven't done any film before, so I was trying to imagine the process of starting from, it makes sense because the sound informs the feeling. So if you have a sense of what the feeling of a scene is, you would better be able to shoot it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the times if I'm sort of just wanting to play with something, I'll, like, connect Absinthe to my player and just listen to different sounds and play with them, and then like see what comes, because ideas always start to come,
like the visual ideas.
Or the feeling, like you say, like, oh, if there was like this sound feels like a really devastating scene, and then it just starts to kind of snowball from there.
And you mentioned a program, Absinthe.
For
the people who know nothing about film audio, what is that for?
So Absinthe is it's a synth program where you can really tailor the sounds, and you've got a lot of flexibility about all the different characteristics and the envelopes and the way that the sound is modulated, and it's got a lot of great presets built in, but then it's really intuitive to adapt it as well.
Yeah, I believe it's a Native Instruments plugin.
Yeah.
Is it not? Yeah. Wonderful. I mean, shout out to Native Instruments because I use a lot of them. But if you ever want to get into software synthesizers, that's the place to start. Honestly, that company's great. Yeah.
So then this is sort of your artistic trajectory, this interesting blend or movement between film and audio at various points. What projects have you done? What's your sort of business side?
So my business is a little bit of everything. It's I'm pretty much open to whatever as a freelancer. Right now I'm doing a lot of remote work, editing and composing, like I mentioned. But I do music videos quite a bit. I've done a little bit of documentary work with CBC. I've done, this past year, I got a grant for a really more artistic kind of short film that I did. So it's just kind of like finding little pieces of pockets of things I can do and doing them.
Right. So one thing that we've talked about on this show before, and I just want to bring it up briefly because I think it's of interest. A lot of people who are involved in the creative fields are curious about how one makes a living doing it.
Right.
And I mean, it kind of makes sense to me the way you are doing it. I'm just assuming with the sort of patchwork. So you pursue your own creative projects, but you're also doing editing work and things that maybe you're a little bit more less your own thing, helping someone else with their thing. Is that sort of how you make it work?
That's how a lot of people make it work. I've always found that kind of a strange balance where I don't necessarily get a lot of calls to come be on set for this or that, mostly because I've kind of aimed at being a director, and director is kind of the one thing that they've already got figured out. Hopefully.
That's the person who's leading the project, so it makes sense.
So I usually end up spending my time pursuing my own projects, and it has kind of worked out for me. So there's a trade-off, I think, where, sometimes I look at other filmmakers and I'm like, oh, they're so busy, and how are they getting this work, and how come I'm never in the running? And then I know for a fact that the same time they're looking at me going, how does he get to do his own projects? And it's just, there's kind of a trade-off there where if you dive into everybody else's stuff, you will do everybody else's stuff. And if you dive into your stuff, then you'll do your stuff. But there is a little bit of money in doing your own stuff. It's not a lot, but a little bit.
Yeah, that is the trade-off, as you say. There is a financial trade-off for
sure,
focusing on your own work. Yeah.
So we're talking about your projects, and you've mentioned you've worked on short films, and I'd like to talk about that in due time. But I'm also curious to talk about your feature that you've done, which I believe is called The Wild.
It's called The Wild,
and I believe you have a trailer
we have
queued
a trailer.
up. Nice. So we can check it out together.
We can check it out. So, and this is your first time seeing this trailer, I imagine,
yes.
Right? Yeah. Okay. Here we go.
You're the edge of this small town where the radio drops.
Dreamland Motel.
Hi, I'm trying to locate my sister, and I think she might be staying at your motel. Hey.
Oh, hey.
It's beautiful, right?
The moon calls you, doesn't it?
Who are we?
We're looking for my sister, Andrea.
It's a girl like you doing out on a night like this.
You two saw something that probably looked a little weird.
Let's just think about what you're doing.
How do we find her?
Have you felt it yet?
Animal.
Like an emptiness and a fullness all at once. Like you can feel it all.
Rubber!
This isn't a kidnapping, okay? Josie!
What did you do with her? I could feel her.
Nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was thinking as I was watching, I was like, this music is awesome.
yeah,
I love the audio of the trailer.
Thank you.
It goes through a lot of different changes. I love the like halfway pickup and the integration of this like live performer echoing kind of throughout the whole thing.
Right.
Very cool.
I just noticed too, and this is really stupid, but Ava Wilde. I didn't even catch that her last name is Wilde. But anyway, I love what she does in the film. As somebody who sound designed the film, that was the thing that I really enjoyed the most was her performance in one scene where it was kind of echoing through a concert hall, and just the way her voice tone is, and just how it resonates through the hall was just beautiful. Like she's one of my favorite parts of the film.
Yeah, she does a great job, and incorporating like real music was something I really wanted to do, and so that the song is written by Megan Nash.
Okay.
Oh yeah, local.
And so it was like initially Megan was also kind of interested in performing as blanking on the character name. I just wrote the movie. I just don't need to know. But it was right during COVID, and so Megan had some like concerns about that. And so it ended up being Ava, and Ava did a great job. When that showed in Indian Head, which is where we shot it, that scene was so surreal because it was like the theater is sitting in the theater that's on the screen also.
Yeah.
And so that was a really cool experience.
So maybe without giving anything away, because this is a movie of mystery, there's a lot of twists and interesting things that happen. What if you're going to sales pitch the movie to somebody? What is this movie about without spoiling too much?
Yeah, so it's about a girl that goes missing from a night out in a small town bar, and so her sister and her best friend go looking for her, and essentially they run into a whole lot of interesting characters, a mysterious cult, and like more questions than answers as they roam around Saskatchewan.
Yeah, and that's one thing I really have to point out about the film is it is very Saskatchewan, like the landscapes, even like you say, filming in Indian Head, like that's a really classic theater in Indian Head. If there's any film that embodies, immortalizing Saskatchewan, I feel like this is one of the best films to do that.
I was just talking about with someone yesterday how much I appreciate film and TV that makes the location a character in the story. It just, I don't know, it just makes it so much more fun to watch. I mean, obviously Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad do this with Albuquerque.
Yes.
And just like making New Mexico, like the whole, I love that. So I love the idea that you've been able to do something like this with Saskatchewan.
Yeah, I think it was something that like, I always felt like it was sort of done in a heavy-handed way in films before, where it's like that's like the main part of it is like this is Saskatchewan, but I didn't want to be like, oh, this is Anytown, USA, and like I wanted it to be kind of true to where I'm from, where everybody in the film is from. And so there's one little joke in the one scene where there's somebody who's like from California asking how you say Saskatchewan. And, and it's like all of us have done that and experienced that.
I've trained people how to get the intonation just right.
So that's like my kind of like one little like joke in it. But there is a map that you can follow of where they go that it makes sense logically that like each town, but if you're from those towns, you might be like, this isn't like just the logistics of filming. Not every town is literally filmed in the town that it's representing.
Right. So I guess, I mean, okay, if we know the general premise of the film, what inspired you to make this kind of story in Saskatchewan? Again, I've seen a lot of Sask films, and as you mentioned, the heavy-handed nature of Saskatchewan.
It's not just Saskatchewan either. Like it can be in other films
Any
too. I know
small
what you mean.
market.
Yeah, like having seen Corner Gas's movie, right? And I mean, obviously it's Corner Gas, so it's Saskatchewan comedy. It's just like, hey, here's a wheat field. Here's like, it just seems kind of almost, well, from what I know, they actually received tourist funding from the government of Saskatchewan. So
They kind of needed to do that like product placement.
It actually was required of them.
Yeah.
So, but this is the first Saskatchewan film I think I've watched, a feature-length film for sure, where you're obviously inspired by the Saskatchewan landscape and the vibe of it, but it doesn't go so into Saskatchewan culture that it's its own film, it's its own thing, its own story. So I'm really curious to hear where your ideas came from.
Well, I think like a lot of it was like I grew up in a tiny little town. Like Limerick is like 200 people or something like that. I graduated with 5 people, and like a lot of the things, driving in the middle of the night and all you see is like headlights and back road, and even like just like rumors and like that small town kind of like that family's cursed. There's something dark going on there. That really inspired like the story aspects and like how these characters are kind of moving through the world of like the weight of sort of small town pressure and lore, almost like history,
That's
family
a real
history.
thing.
Yeah, like it really kind of like follows a person around. So like I think a lot of it came from growing up here and having like a real authentic experience of Saskatchewan, not like a tourist version of it.
Yeah, and even the film is plays on some supernatural elements at times, and Saskatchewan is synonymous with that. There's even whole books, Saskatchewan ghost stories, and like you say, if people say, "Oh, that graveyard over by Esterhazy, Saskatchewan, it's haunted," there's this, or like
everyone has stories.
There's so much lore in this province of even supernatural things too, right? So. I can see that through line now, 100%.
So in the wild, you directed it, you wrote it, like you wrote the screenplay.
Yes.
You did the sound design.
Yeah. I scored
Sort of.
it, and it was kind of like a team effort for the.
Yeah.
What else? What other cookies did you have? Cookie jars. I don't know why I went with that metaphor. Sorry about that.
Of like. Too many, really. Like I edited the film. I'm kind of the lead producer and driving force of getting it seen at theaters, which I did last year, and the next steps, which will be to kind of get it into like an online space. But I was involved in almost every aspect of it. But I had definitely had like Jeremy Ratzlaff was my DP, and I had a great team of people doing like April Casper producing, and just a ton of great people with like clothes and locations, and the actors obviously doing a great job.
So out of all of those hats that you wore, I'm just mixing metaphors like ad hoc now. Which was your favorite one? Do you have a favorite role that you played in this film?
I mean, it's directing. Directing is the kind of the reason that I do it all. It's like, I write so that I have something to direct. And I would certainly consider directing stuff that I haven't written, but generally I kind of prefer the stuff that I've written over the stuff I see.
Right.
But there are times when I've worked with writers to kind of be like, here's my idea. If you want to be the writer and put this all on the page, that's cool. I can just kind of like feed ideas and like give you feedback. And I like working that way as well. Yeah.
And sorry, just along those lines, one other thing that I'm kind of curious about, if you have all these, I mean, making a film is a really interconnected thing. There's a lot of things that are happening all at once, a lot of moving parts that can make and break the whole project, right? Are there any of those parts that you consider to be the most fundamental? For example, is like a good script kind of the basis of it? Like, can a good film be made with a crappy script, for example?
I feel like I almost have like a controversial take on that. I would say like, yes, it can be. If the director is really connected to what they're doing, as for the sake of like writers listening to this, no, you should always write good scripts. But if the writer really has a strong vision, they don't necessarily have to have a perfect script to create that vision.
Yeah.
So you see the execution that the director brings more kind of foundational in some sense?
I think so. I think, especially when they're really connected to it. You know, if it's a situation where it's like a bad script and they just bring in sort of like a director in a sort of freelance situation, then it's probably not going to turn out.
They're not going to care.
But
enough.
if it's like their passion project and they're just sort of like writing it in a way that's like helping them keep the ideas in order, the script might not read as a great script, but it might be a great script up here.
I see. Yeah. One of the reasons I'm just asking about this is having watched a lot of amateur short films and things like this, it seems like a lot of people tend to focus on technique. And I see a lot of really beautiful shots and kind of neat ideas, but the bones of it, and this could be in directing as well as in writing, right? There's something that maybe doesn't quite come all the way through. I know actors, a lot of it rests on the actors' performances as well too. And this is where it's like, how do you judge one as being more foundational than the other? But I was just kind of curious about your take.
Yeah, I think you need it all to come together. Obviously, everybody has to do their job, and you have to create a good atmosphere so that everybody can do their job and communicate with what you want out of them. One thing that I'm learning over and over again is like the more I do, the less effective I am. The more I do that's not directing, the less effective I am as a director.
Yeah.
There's things that I miss if I'm concerned about continuity, or if I'm concerned about affording the day, which I always am. But the more that you can hand off to somebody you trust, the better, for sure.
That's fantastic advice. Somebody who's a one-person stop for a lot of things.
Yeah. Making the case for creative collaboration, as we said.
Yes, our first episode is about creative
Don't try to do everything yourself.
And, it's in indie film, too, this is such a difficult hurdle, right? Because finding the funding to hire enough people or finding enough skilled people even, especially now in Saskatchewan with how busy everybody is and how many films are coming through. Like we have less and less skilled people available to work on indie stuff. So I'm really curious about your approach to making an indie feature-length film in Saskatchewan. And we talked about short films, and I always hear, short films are cheap to make, difficult to execute because of the short narrative, right? But a feature-length film allows you that time to create a full story. You have real time with the characters. You don't have to sacrifice as much in your story.
But it can be super expensive.
But it's so time. I mean, it can take years of your life, right? And so I'd love to hear some of your experiences about when you were starting to think about, hey, am I going to make a feature-length film? Finding that funding, and then what was it like crewing up and logistically for you, those kinds of things.
For sure. Shorts, I think, just to like kind of backtrack a little, like shorts are great for filmmakers to establish techniques and skills and a network. And I feel like doing shorts is the best way to know if you're ready for the feature. And it's not necessarily to say that you've made a great short, so now it's time to make a feature. It's more so like I wanted to figure out what my directing style was. Like, did I want to direct more like Kubrick, where everything's like really intense and crazy? Did I want to direct like Terrence Malick, where it's really loose and the actors don't even really know what's going on? So I tried different things in shorts. I did a short that was just an outline, and me and the actors figured it out along the way as we were shooting. I did another short that was like really tight to the script, and then I figured out like, okay, these are skills that I have that I can develop, that I can use. For me, it kind of depends on the actors. A lot of the times the actors want certain things from you. It's not, like for them to go and sort of to that like improvisational, we'll go with that, state. It's a certain space that they have to go into. So you can't just be like, oh, just make it up. Like they need more info than that. But there are some actors that really kind of thrive on that, just going somewhere and whatever comes out. So shorts are a great way to train yourself and to know what you need, and also to meet the people that you want to work with. I certainly worked with Jeremy a handful of times before we took on something so big. And I would find it hard to work with somebody that I didn't know. That's something that happens a lot with, especially with cinematographers, where, well, we need to bring in a big cinematographer to kind of give this a chance of going far. But it's hard because you don't get the chance to work with them ahead of time.
Yeah. Well, and Jeremy Ratzlaff, for those of you who are unaware, listening to the podcast, is easily one of the best cinematographers around town. He's really developed his craft. So,
and he's on everything.
He's on everything. Right
he's
now.
doing something on all the projects that he can.
And if you've never seen any of his short films, Fear and Trembling, by Faith Dennis, I worked on both those films. But yeah, really good short film
for sure.
maker. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like a good DP would be worth their weight in gold in terms of being able to. Do you work the most closely with the director of photography as the director? Like, I assume they're kind of, I don't know. You're kind of always in the scenes together.
Yeah, you're definitely side by side. Yeah. I mean, you're both looking at the monitor together. What I found on The Wild was Jeremy would frame up the shot, and at first, I always wanted things about 6 inches lower than his first shot. And so at first, I'd be like, can we get that? This much, that. But by day 2 or 3, he'll frame up the shot, and you just kind of look at him, and he'll go like, or this. And, it's just like you get a shorthand with, and you just start to understand each other more.
I could see the virtue of what you're talking about, though, as using short films almost as a testing ground for your own ideas, but for the relationships that you're going to carry forward into much larger projects. Because you're going to be spending like literally hundreds of hours with people on a feature, especially someone you're working side by side with. So that relationship isn't, I mean, it doesn't have to be pre-established, but I could see the risk involved in going into that kind of relationship blind.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're always going to have pre-production meetings. You're always going to meet somebody before, or maybe not always, but in a feature situation, you're gonna have conversations with people. So I mean, if somebody you really don't get along with them, you're hopefully going to figure that out before. But like set is difficult. Set kind of tests people, especially indie stuff. Sometimes you're pushing the day way longer than you really should. People are exhausted. People are tired. Sometimes people start to get kind of like grumpy, and figuring out how to communicate with each other and respect each other through that is a really like valuable thing, and it helps when you know each other.
Yeah, what is it about sets being such a hotbed for conflict? Is it just the time spent? Like, is it just the hours clocked, or is there something else going on in there that causes it?
There's a lot of creative opinions and voices that all want to be heard and respected, and there's a limited amount of time to do that. And yes, people are tired and exhausted. There's a lot of different personalities, strong personalities usually. And then one person can make a whole crew have to wait hours or even a whole day. One little thing that you're waiting on can mess up your whole day, and that can spread really quickly. So, there's a lot of finely tuned little gears running on a set that, there's space for conflict for sure.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking for your context, like thinking about having a band with 5 members. Right? Now multiply that by
how many people or whatever.
And you're all trying to get on the same page and act like the same well-oiled machine.
And you can also get, what is that when you're trapped in a room with someone? It's like you're like a hostage and you get crazy. There's
kind of like cabin fever.
It's cabin fever. Thank you. That's what I was trying to think of. Not a hostage thing. I was mixing my ideas. There's got to be something like that to it too. I remember when I went to culinary school, and it was just like a small group of us together every day, all day for 6 months. You got to a point with each other where the dynamic became much more sibling-like, and there would be like inflammatory moments in a way that there just wouldn't be in normal life.
Yeah,
it seems to be removed from regular life in some kind of way.
Yeah, people often refer to. I hesitate to say it, but people often sort of, once you've been on a crew with somebody, there's sort of like a family-like experience to it. Yes. But I do sort of like avoid that statement a little bit as like a director and a driver of the creative project, because I know that's like from a corporate context, that's kind of like a gross thing to say, right? Like, oh, we're a family here. And you're like,
Oh yeah,
no,
but
we're not.
meanwhile you're the leader and doing everything. Yeah.
So like, if other people feel that way, great, but I'm not gonna like push that thought on.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. I do think in the indie film world specifically, it is different too, because again, you kind of you're doing so much with so little. You really are in the trenches together. There's less separation between departments too. Like I think in a really big feature, somebody who's working in lighting might never talk to somebody working in sound, and vice, and all these different relationships are much more spread out. So I think the indie film world is definitely more family-like than the well, this is what I'm assuming. I mean, I've worked on some big features, but not tons. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really worked on very many like giant things either. So,
and so just going back to one of the things that you brought up a little bit earlier is, my understanding of funding for these sorts of projects is there's usually 3 sources. Let me know if I'm wildly overgeneralizing, but you can get like government funding or grants. You can get, I'm not remembering my terminology today. What's the thing called? A patron. You can have patrons. Or you can self-fund it just through your own Steam, your own whatever. I don't know if there's other avenues to funding, but
pretty accurate. With indie films, really anywhere you can get your money is valid. Like, but grants are an option. I did get a grant for The Wild, but it's a grant that doesn't exist anymore, which is I think kind of a bummer. I wish they would bring it back, because getting filmmakers from shorts to features is like a big thing. The trouble with a lot of those grants is like they'll cover, this grant was 50%, so you still have to come up with quite a bit of money. So it's difficult to do that. I was lucky to get some like private investor kind of situation. So, but a lot of filmmakers aren't able to do that. So, if we had kind of better programming or more options, that would be helpful. It's really hard to do crowdfunding campaigns. I've tried them in the past, and it feels like you're basically just kind of begging people for like $10.
Yeah.
You put as much work to get, $10 or collectively $500 as you would into getting several $1,000s from a more proper investment. So unless you have that big audience already, it's a really hard avenue to chase. Right.
So I think I remember hearing once upon a time in the late 90s, Clerks was made on $20,000 or something. I think 20. That was the number I remember.
It was a pretty low number, yeah.
Yep, inflation would change that number nowadays. But is it possible to make an indie film on that low of a budget?
Well, The Wild was a $100K budget.
Yeah.
So it's considered a micro budget. It's not nothing, obviously, but it's about as low as you can go without it being considered a no budget. I mean, even no budget has a little bit of money behind it, right?
Right.
So anything's possible. For me, it was about relationships and resources, and there's a lot of people who are willing to be a part of this because we've known each other for a long time, and we're excited to see it come to life. So those, if you can do that, if you can develop those, then yeah, you can make some money, go further. But if you're like a brand new filmmaker, you don't know anybody, and somebody's like, "Well, I'll give you $50,000. You want to make a movie?" It's actually going to be a lot harder than that.
Well, and that's probably some of the some further benefits of doing the shorts. Aside from creative experimentation, it's a way for you to sort of validate yourself in the eyes of others, that you're serious, that you're good. Yeah, so they can see that.
Yeah, shorts are sort of people often think of them as from the outside as like, what's their commercial effect? Oh, they didn't make the money back. They didn't get 50,000 views or 1 million views or whatever. So what did they do? And it's like, shorts are really sort of like a portfolio career building thing first, I think. And then, if you happen to have something that goes to Sundance and somebody who wants to make a feature with you, great. But it doesn't have to be that. It doesn't even really have to be good. But it's good to get out and do it.
Yeah, no, that's a really good way of looking at it. I think you're right. One of the things I've really struggled with our local funding body, Creative Saskatchewan, is they've always talked about, market exportability and really funding people based on their ability to make money, which I think is completely backwards when we're talking about independent art. We talk about, like, the same thing happens with music. I've received a grant for a music video and marketing my music video, right? And all those kinds of things. And again, when we're talking about independent artists who are trying to, like you say, create a portfolio, become better known, it's not about turning bank. It's about building your artist practice.
Well,
right?
and some of turning bank, so to speak, is cultivating a high quality industry.
Exactly.
So if the province actually wants to have more film, like economic activity that way, you fund promising projects, not to get a direct return from it, but to get like a longer term return.
Yeah, and that was one thing. One of my friends, who's a filmmaker from here, had said a lot about what was going on now in the local industry. You know, we're really focused on bringing in these bigger films, which is great. That's wonderful. Let's get people working again. But the other side of it is, but how do we create our local filmmakers? How do we fund people to make indie films and keep that industry thriving as well at the same time? Because I am somewhat worried that the current makeup of things is going to forget about the indie filmmaker, and we're going to be focusing all of our funding on those. They're like $10 million films or $30 million in some cases, which again, wonderful experience, great work. Let's keep people fed, but let's also improve artistry in the province. Let's tell Saskatchewan stories. Let's do that, and that's where some of this money should be going to, in my opinion. But
yeah, I think there is a grant that they've come out with now for like emerging filmmakers. That's like a short film or a music video grant. That's 100% contribution, so they give you the full. That's
way better.
So that's really nice. It's not perfect, but it's a step in the right direction. And I think in situations like that, not to defend Creative Sask, but I think that they want you to be thinking about the market and how you're going to make, how you're going to position this in the market, but in those situations, I feel like they're not necessarily saying that you have to nail it and make all the money back. They just want you to be cognizant.
You still get the grant, even if you don't make money with it, right?
Yeah.
Fair enough.
That is true. Yeah. It's like there is a big piece of a grant application that is that aspect of it, and maybe it is correct. You're getting people to think about.
And maybe to continue this defense, because I think Sask Music's all we've got. We're lucky to have it. There's something to be said for being able to. I just totally lost my train of thought. What were we just talking about?
But yeah, Creative Saskatchewan, which I think. I think Sask Music is now just Creative Saskatchewan.
Oh, it's Creative Sask now.
Yeah, I think it has all just molded into one.
Oh, yeah.
There were some concerns about that too in the industry, because we were worried about, divvying up the Creative Sask budget towards music and film and different things and how that was going to work. But and I'm definitely, I don't want to give the wrong impression that I completely knock what Creative Sask is doing. I think again, we have taken some steps in the right direction. I do believe that. Hopefully we can continue to just keep indie film in our brains,
For sure.
And even something like, I'm thinking about how many of these big films coming through are working with Indigenous filmmakers, or working with people from other minority groups or things like that. Like, a lot of it's just, hey, Tim Robbins wants to show up here, which is something that's happening. Want to show up here and do a movie next year. Oh, cool. Let's give him some money. And it's like, cool experience. Again, great experience for some people. But,
and having just recaptured my train of thought. If you force people to confront the marketing aspect of their work, even if that's not fun, I hate doing that stuff as a musician. Anytime I've applied for grants, it's awful. But it probably helps prevent a lot of obscure fringe kind of art creations that would be for no one, or that at least aren't considered who it's for in a way.
Yeah. I think, we have Sask Arts, which is a great, they're almost the opposite of Creative Sask in that regard, where their whole thing is like, this isn't a financial thing that you're going to make bank on. This is something that you, as an artist, are compelled to do, that you need to do. They don't quite have the same funding that Creative Sask has, I think, but there is that balance if you look for it. But I think as an industry here, we need to look at how we're going to take filmmakers from emerging to too established, and we need some recognition from like the industry that like what they're calling emerging and established, there's like a chasm in between of filmmakers. That's where I fall. That's where a lot of my colleagues fall, of like, we're not exactly emerging, but we're not making $10 million, movies on the, I always forget what it's called, the screen stage.
Volume.
That's what it is.
And there's probably a huge amount of talent in that void, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always, like, every time I see the investments, the numbers, I always go, well, okay, they put $8 million into it. What if they gave 8 filmmakers $1 million?
Exactly.
All of a sudden, we'd have an indie film scene here, just like that.
Yeah. And some of these micro budget films that have been made here, I think it's Telefilm Funding has given money to a lot of emerging filmmakers. Lucas Frizon got money like that.
Right.
Some of those films have been extremely successful for what they are doing. I've never looked at their books or anything like that, but based on the amount of attention that some of these films get, the amount of theater screenings, stuff like that, like something is happening. It is creating enough of a buzz for it to be, a worthy investment that way. And then you see a filmmaker like that move on, and like you say, like now he's creating TV series and new movies and getting more funding, and it that kind of funding probably set him up to have the career he's having, So,
So
super important.
What was this? Sorry if I'm setting you up for a hard question, but what was the biggest challenge in getting The Wild to the finish line where people could actually watch it?
Funding was definitely a big one. It really wasn't a bad time. Like I wrote the script in a week. It went really quickly. I was just like stayed up all night every night and just wrote.
Wow. And
so that was in the summer of like 2019, and I knew that I was aiming for the micro budget grant. Like that was the point of writing the script was, okay, this grant exists. I should do something to go for it. So I did. I think I applied in October, and I think I got approved, 6 weeks later or something like that. And so then I spent the next several months just trying to figure out how am I going to fund the rest of this. Finally got something to come through, but like there is that, the hard part is that you just like, if I don't get it, then I
can't do anything.
I can't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's matched funding from Creative SAS. So, it caps here. And if you get less, they will match that funding. But I don't know how. There are films that have done it for less. Like I know, I know there's other films that match their funding or whatever, and were able to scale back and do it for less. But that seemed really hard. That seemed like a hard thing to, if you didn't get the full amount, how are you supposed to make it work, right? But from there, it was just kind of like always moving forward, always pushing ahead, always, dealing with problems as they arise. So I would say that it's kind of bookended with the trick of it is getting that funding. And then at the end, the releasing part of it is definitely a whole new world that I'm learning slowly, which is why the DIY theater run that I did last year, it went well. But then I had to kind of sit back and be like, okay, I have to learn so much about what's next before I can even really feel comfortable like agreeing to anything or trying anything.
And that goes back to what you were saying before about wearing too many hats, right? One person doing too many roles. Same thing there again, where if you had a distributor involved, somebody who wants to help with those kinds of things, it just, that's not the thing you were hoping to probably be an expert in, right? I want to make films, I want to direct, I want to write, but now I got to actually do the marketing piece.
I've certainly had that experience with releasing an album.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have as well, where there's this thrill of the whole creative process. I love recording. I love writing the songs for it and going through that whole thing. Figuring out the funding, like that's hard, but there's something that is a massive obstacle in my mind after all of that is done. Then you have to do something with it.
Yeah.
That's, I think, for me, the most difficult part.
Yeah, I would say so as well. I have over the past year, I've like decided I want to get good at releasing. I want to get good at putting things out. And what I've realized is that the path to doing that is actually like failing lots and trying things and putting stuff out there and having nobody look at it. And like, that's how you actually get that information. It's definitely not, making a short and then going, well, I want to release it, but I only want to release it if I get 10,000 views. And I don't think I'm going to get 10,000 views. And so it never gets released.
Oh, you just like keep it in the archives for that special
that
moment.
Certain thing that never happens.
Yeah.
So I've been working at, releasing things more often. I released a sort of a experimental series this summer, which was almost completely a release experiment to see what would happen.
How so? How did you do it?
So the film is a choose your own adventure film.
Oh, cool.
And so I've built out a website where you can go watch it and choose your own adventure, like the way you would expect it to play out. But I know that like for me, trying to get someone to go to a website is hard, right?
It's very hard, yeah.
So I wanted to put it on social media where people already were. So I did like a voting sort of system where I put the first episode out and then I gave people the option to vote on A or B.
Oh, cool.
And then people voted, did their thing, and then I released the next one and the same thing. And it's just three sort of rounds of that. So the experiment, I was like, it doesn't matter if nobody watches it. The videos are a bit longer, which Instagram doesn't love. Like, it doesn't push them out.
Yeah.
So I was prepared for it to be like, oh, if it gets like 300 views and like a handful of votes, that's just, like that's fine. And it did better. Like, it did like 3,000 views and it got like 100 votes, whatever. So I was like, okay, like that's something, like it's not, those aren't good by Instagram numbers, but they were good for me, like I learned something from doing it. So I'm just trying to take those principles and apply them to The Wild and every other short that I'm doing, and just keep collecting data and learning and getting better at putting stuff out.
I really like that focus because you are correct. I've learned from like releasing songs, releasing things that often too, like you can do all the right things with something and it will not have the same impact as something else that you did all the right things with, or maybe you did none of the right things with this other thing and it had an impact. And I think people who work in marketing like are really intelligent people and have some great things to offer, but in the end, they can't 100% tell you what's going to.
I mean, there's always so much luck involved.
There's a certain amount of luck, right? And it's like you can play the algorithms, you can do all those things, and you can get to a certain point with that. But even I found with my music videos, the one that I put the least amount of effort into is the one that did the best, and then the one that I had actual funding and like really like paid people for and things like that did the worst of like the most recent music videos I did. So,
with my music clients, I'm always encouraging them to like have a plan, like create all this support content and like really put it out there, because I want to avoid the experience of like, we paid thousands of dollars for a music video, we put it on YouTube and got 200 views and it just sits there now.
Yep.
And it's like, that might happen, but there are ways to get more out of it, right? There are ways to build out the content, to have a schedule, to build up hype. Maybe even putting it in festivals, like things like that. But still a lot of musicians just put it on YouTube, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Actually, this is kind of a soulless thing that I did, but I actually had a decent amount of success with Facebook ads in one of my music videos.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why, but I guess I know why. You pay for it. It's I wasn't in a position to do a lot of my time labor, so it's like, okay, well, I'll just put some money into it, and it worked pretty well over like a longer period of time. And once you get the ball rolling and a little bit of traction on a music video's views, it starts to kind of go on its own a little bit more. And I mean, I'm not talking big numbers. I think one of my music videos has 12,000 views or something like that. But it, getting it past that threshold of at least 1,000 or 2,000 seems to really be important.
Yeah. Yeah, I found that with like the trailers for The Wild and stuff, and I boosted those as well on Facebook, especially with the theater run. I was like, well, how much can it cost to like boost an ad in Tisdale, Saskatchewan?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So speaking of distribution and releasing, we know the Wild obviously already had its theater run a while back. But you were talking to me before the show about doing some kind of online distribution. So yeah, maybe tell me a bit more about what your plans are for that.
Yeah. So there is a small window of. I am still trying to get it in theaters in Ontario right now.
Okay.
Just kind of because it's so small, it's not like it has this like release and everybody knew it came out, right? People in Ontario haven't heard of it, so it would be like a new movie to them.
Yeah.
So I am still trying to do a little bit of that. And Ontario specifically because they don't have a ratings system. So you don't have to get the film like PG or whatever rated to screen there. You just have to give like a little description of what's in the film.
I just thought it was because people from Ontario seem to love Saskatchewana or Saskatchewania.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully. But, so I'm just trying the same approach of just writing all these theaters and seeing what happens. I've gotten a little bit of response, but not much is happening yet. But we'll see. But each province has a different rating system, and you have to pay money to get it rated in each thing. And I'm just trying to avoid having to pay extra money at this point.
Yeah, especially when so much has already been paid. I can see that being, it's just the money pit that never ends.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what I'm trying to do with the online premiere is I've been calling it like the big ticket, which essentially is like it will be within a period of time. So like 30 days or something where you can pay to see The Wild online, but it will also come with like interviews, behind the scenes content, my short films, and I'm even doing like a micro course on a DIY theater run that I'm going to include in that. So it's like kind of like a little bit of everything and like a big value for that $10 purchase, because I know like most people don't like go to a website to watch a movie. They go to Netflix or Prime. So I'm trying to like give this extra value. And I think the course is something that people do understand going to a website to see and like to go through. So that's something I've been working on just this weekend, like developing the content for that. But yeah, so that'll be like a limited release, and then I will go to the kind of final stage of trying to get it on like Crave and Gem and go on Film Hub and try to get it into whatever sort of international streaming services I can.
Cool, yeah. Awesome. I guess Gem seems like the obvious one to me, just because it's Canadian content.
Gem should be good. Crave is similar, the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
I have my fingers crossed for Crave. I feel like it's a good match there, but we'll see what happens.
Would you ever do physical media, like a DVD?
It's like
I'm going through a DVD renaissance right now, so I'm a big fan.
Oh yeah, I love how they had like like the commentaries and the extra. That's kind of what I'm modeling my online thing is like you get all this extra content with it, but it's definitely like a cost to that,
it's
right?
So expensive.
I think if I was doing that, I would find a distributor to do that part of it with. I wouldn't want to have to like figure it all out myself.
Mail it from your basement or something. Right. Yeah.
That's like Neil Breen. Neil Breen does that. He just burns his own discs.
Nice.
And literally mails them to people directly.
That's awesome, actually.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. That's like the only way you can view his films. They're not available digitally.
Right. Oh, cool.
Yeah. Although people rip them all the time.
Well, that's what they're. I was going to say that's what CDs are made for, but that's controversial statements.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I think this would be a good opportunity to switch over to our final segment, which is the artist spotlight segment, where if there's any artist or any film or anything that you just really like that you think people should know about.
Sure. My kind of go-to with this question is like David Lynch as a director. I know he's well known, but he's also not super well known. Like everybody knows who he is, but like I don't know how much people really engage with his films. Yeah. So I would say Mulholland Drive that was my starting point for David Lynch and weird films. There are definitely some Mulholland Drive references in The Wild. So there's a nice kind of connective tissue there. He's just even just as a person, I love watching interviews of him, how weird he is and how like sweet and innocent he is. And then you watch his films and they're just so insane.
So what is it about, what's weird about David Lynch's films?
Well, they're very, very abstract. Like you're supposed to kind of not know what you just watched when you come out at the end of it. There's a lot of sort of Americana and like Midwest references, and then there's also a lot of like LA kind of like thing references in it, but it's the strangest, most absurd kind of version of it. And so the story, like the story is pretty loose and pretty abstract, so you won't necessarily have a strong sense of like what you just watched necessarily, but they're still very watchable. I find like it's not something where you're gonna be like, oh, that made me mad because I didn't understand.
Gotcha.
They're funny at points. They're charming. The music is incredible. The visuals are really like kind of dreamy and cool.
I'm a big Lost Highway fan. That's one of my favorite movies of all time. And that was how I was introduced to David Lynch, was through a Lost Highway. And yeah, I know what you mean. Like the narrative in that film is just all over the place. There's almost kind of a weird alternate reality time traveling thing happening. Yeah. Because the protagonist is changing actors throughout the film.
What?
It's really difficult to follow in some ways, but then it's also like, I know what you're saying. It's like you're so drawn into what's happening. And there's some scenes that just drag on, but not like in a bad way. Like they really stay with one character for a while and give them something to do. It's fascinating.
Yeah, they're very much, it's like, I think there's a name for it, but it's like very kind of dream-driven, dream state. Like the way the dreams don't actually make sense. That's kind of how David Lynch movies are supposed to.
There's like connected things, but they don't necessarily connect easily.
Yeah. And yet when you're dreaming, you just go with it, right? You just kind of like, oh yeah, that's this. Like yeah, that's my dad. It just doesn't look like my dad. Like things like that.
You're just in the flow of it.
Yeah,
right?
it's like,
you're not resisting it.
You just accept it. And I feel like that's how you watch a David Lynch movie.
Yeah, wonderful.
Well, is there anything that you would like to, of your own, that you would like to recommend people to? Your website, any social media accounts, any of your work?
Certainly. My Instagram is kind of like my central social media platform, which is AaronSinclair.film. I post everything. You can get to everything that I'm doing through there. I post about things most often there. The online thing for The Wild hasn't launched yet, but it will be at thewildmovie.ca. I just have to put it all together. But you can sign up for like a newsletter there.
Perfect. We'll link it. Yeah.
Help people get to it. But yeah, people are always asking me like, oh, where can I see The Wild? And I'm always like, oh, it's coming. So
soon.
It's coming.
It does deserve to be seen. I will say, when you were talking earlier about the budgets and what we can do with those budgets, I think this film does a lot with the small budget that you have visually, and the acting is good. There's a lot about it that's so good for that micro budget film.
Thank you. Yeah, I went for coffee probably like a year ago now. I went for coffee with Lowell Dean just to kind of pick his brain, who's the Dialone director, kind of the like Saskatchewan director who's done it, who's actually kind of made it work. And we just talked about film, and I kind of picked his brain. And one of the things he said that stuck out to me was that like what I did on The Wild and what he did on Dialone, it's not that different. It's he had a little bit more resources, a little bit more people. It's just scaled, but the actual core of making the film and doing it is pretty much the same.
Yeah. That's a really good, great compliment from a great director.
For sure. Yeah.
Also comforting. Because it means, when you're at that $1 million budget plus level, you're still going to feel at ease in some way with the experience of it.
Yeah. And there's plenty of times where I've watched interviews with directors, like even like Martin Scorsese, where I'm like, oh, I've been through that.
Yeah.
How have I been through what Martin Scorsese has been? But it's just because we make movies, we make shorts, and it's the same thing.
Awesome.
Cool.
All right. Well, on that note, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much. And
I'm joining that mailing list. I'm eagerly anticipating the micro course and the movie.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Dan, for coming. And I think we'll leave it there. Thank you, audience, for joining in again. It's been a while. And we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for checking out this episode of the Creative Coliseum. We'll see you next time. The Creative Coliseum is mixed and edited by David Roman. Executive producers are Alicia Van Betju and David Roman. Gear support provided by Roman Empire Studios. Theme music created by Roman Music YQR. Recorded live on location in Regina, Canada, Treaty 4 territory. Voiceover performed by Sundance Robson. Logo design provided by Danielle Austin. Special thanks Kyle Parkinson, Laura Posada, and Rob Hillstead. The Creative Coliseum is a Nerd Party entertainment production in conjunction with Piano TV. Now get back out there and conquer your creativity.